Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Iowa City People for Justice in Palestine, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's program, Intersections on the Path to Peace, where Christians and Muslims meet. Before we introduce our speaker tonight, I'd like to give you some information and make a few announcements. People for Justice in Palestine meets the first and third Tuesdays of each month, 6:30 p.m. downtown Iowa City. We'll be meeting tomorrow night at Alibaba's Middle Eastern restaurant. Come at 6:15 if you plan to order food. We'd also like to call your attention to the UI Anti-War Committee, which meets on Thursdays when the UI is in session at 6:30 p.m. in the northwestern room of the Union. And all this information is presented in the brochures that are on your seats, along with question cards. And we invite you to write down questions you may have for the speaker, and we will collect them later and read them from this podium. Upcoming on Friday, May the 1st, there will be May Day observances and anti-war observances in the city. We invite you to keep track of our websites, and you can learn more about the events. Many of them are being planned right now. Also, on Saturday, the 2nd of May, there will be a film festival at Mount Mercy College in Cedar Rapids by our friends up there, which will show many films related to this issue, this issue of Palestine and Palestinian human rights, such as Peace Propaganda in the Promised Land, about media bias, and Beyond the Mirage, which is also a good introduction to the issue. On Tuesday, the 23rd of June, there will be a Michigan Peace Team report at 7 p.m. here in this room about nonviolent resistance in Palestine, which actually does exist. Following tonight's program by Professor Dennis Bricker, who's Emeritus Professor of Engineering here at the UI, we will have a brief presentation by Diana Kadic, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, who will present a petition from the United States campaign to end the Israeli occupation. This is a web-based activist service which we invite everybody to get involved with, and we'll be talking about that petition and how you can do more to change policy in Washington. Finally, tonight we have a listserv that you're invited to sign up for PJP, and we also have a listserv that will give you regular updates from the Christian Peacemaker teams, which are currently providing nonviolent witness and activism in Palestine in the occupied territories, and which our speaker Dennis has been involved with. So thank you very much for coming, and here's Dennis Bricker.
Okay, let me begin by telling a little bit about myself. I've been a resident of Iowa City since 1974, and during that time I spent 30 years teaching industrial engineering at the university before I retired about 4 years ago. I grew up as a Methodist, but I became a Mennonite during the Vietnam War era when I became a conscientious objector. And my teaching career has given me the opportunity during sabbaticals and now retirement to live and teach in People's Republic of China, Korea, Taiwan, Portugal, Lithuania, and Armenia. And the announcement I read about my presentation says I'm a frequent visitor to Palestine. Actually, I've made only 3 visits there. In 2005, I went on a CPT, Christian Peacemaker Team, delegation for 3 weeks. And in 2007, I spent 4 months teaching at Bethlehem University. And then this past fall, I spent 5 weeks with the CPT team in the village of Atwani. And later I'll describe some of my experiences and observations from that time. All of these visits I made were to the West Bank of Palestine. I've never visited Gaza, and although the situation there certainly deserves our attention, I'm going to confine my remarks to the West Bank. My words tonight were prepared primarily for Christians during this Holy Week prior to Easter. I'm not an expert in theology, either Christian and certainly not Muslim, nor an expert in history. And you must keep in mind that Christianity and Islam are not monolithic, and you have to beware of generalizations that I might make. But I find that American Christians are dangerously ignorant of Islam and the Quran. And I think very few Christians have actually read any translation of the Quran. They're ignorant of the difference between Israel and Palestine, I find. I have people asking me after I've been to Palestine, how was my trip to Israel? They're very confused about the distinction between the biblical kingdom of Israel and the modern state of Israel. But the Holy Lands, as we know it, is home to the three faiths which derive from Abraham: the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians, which we could all consider children of Abraham. The Christians are mostly Arabs, Eastern Orthodox, some Roman Orthodox, only a few Protestants. At the time of the partition, they were about 15% of the population. Now I think they are less than 2%. And it goes without saying that not all Arabs are Muslims, just as not all Muslims are Arabs. Another popular misconception among Americans, I think. Despite its religious and political significance, Palestine is actually a very small area. Here I've lightly shaded 15 Iowa counties whose total area is about the same as that of the state of Israel, and an additional 5 counties more darkly shaded to represent the occupied West Bank. This land is the subject of heated conflict. The Jews base their claims to the land on the promises made by God to Abraham as recorded in the Bible. Of course, when God promised the land to Abraham and his descendants, it was already occupied. And the Bible has gory stories of what can only today be called ethnic cleansing or genocide. These Old Testament stories, as you can imagine, present a problem to Arab Christians today as to how they are to be interpreted. As I said, very gory, very violent stories. God is supposedly to have said that the Jews should doom the inhabitants to destruction, grant them no terms, and give them no quarter. Well, for about 70 years during the kingdom of David and Solomon, the Jews controlled an empire which encompassed what is roughly Palestine. This was short-lived, however, and the kingdom was divided and it was dominated by more powerful nations for many years. And after Rome destroyed Jerusalem and scattered the Jews about 1900 years ago, Israel ceased to exist as a nation. In the early 20th century, as part of a movement called Zionism, Jews began to return, especially after World War II. The British governed Palestine after World War II, but then turned it over to the United Nations, which partitioned the land into Jewish and Palestinian areas. Despite the Jews being a minority of the population, they were given a majority of the land, and the better quality land at that. Almost immediately, Israel declared its independence, which was followed by a war with its neighbors. In this war, they got control of still more land, a total of 77%, with only 23% for the Palestinians. And in the Six-Day War of 67, Israel was able to occupy all of Palestine. Since the establishment of the State of Israel, and even before, there's been a continual process of ethnic cleansing and colonizing of the land by the construction of settlements. There are now about 500,000 Israelis living in settlements in the West Bank. So when I say settler, I am referring to these Israelis living in these communities. Some Israelis choose to live in the settlements for economical reasons. The government builds the apartments and subsidizes those who live there with low-cost rents and mortgages. Other settlers have political or Zionist motivations. They consider it to be their religious duty to occupy the land and claim it for the State of Israel. Land for these settlements is confiscated without compensation, and Palestinian homes are demolished to clear the area. The process of ethnic cleansing has continued since the establishment of the modern State of Israel, even during peace negotiations. Ariel Sharon, former Prime Minister, said everybody has to move, run, and grab as many hilltops as they can. Everything we don't grab will go to them. A few years ago, Israel began the construction of what is called a security barrier. Its purpose is seen by the Palestinians not as providing security to Israelis, but as just another land grab. In the area around Jerusalem, the wall reaches deep into Palestinian territory in order to annex land to Israel. And here you see the so-called green line, which is the official border, and then the red line shows the path of the wall. The security barrier or wall is built within the occupied territories, not on the boundary, and 10% of the occupied territories are on the Israeli side of the wall, essentially annexing those lands to Israel. And it's telling that the length of the wall is about twice the length of the green line along which it is to be built. Here you see a detailed map showing the Jerusalem area and the path of the wall. Around Bethlehem, the security barrier appears to be a prison wall. There are watchtowers every few hundred meters, and it's, I think, twice as high as the Berlin Wall and much more forbidding. Construction of the wall isn't complete. In some places, the security barrier is temporarily a fence of barbed wire with electronic sensors and a patrol road. In the fall of 2007, I lived a few hundred yards from this section of the security barrier. Notice the path. It comes in here and is very convoluted, as you can see. And notice the Palestinian orchards of olives up here, which is now completely cut off from the Palestinians. The biblical attitude toward the land is that of stewardship. The land belongs to God, and Jews may inhabit it, but they don't possess the land in the usual sense that we use the word. I guess to back up a little bit, this shows in the green the Palestinian-controlled areas and the way that it is gradually being eroded. Okay. But the Psalms say, "The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it." Leviticus says, "The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, with me you are but aliens and tenants." And the promises are always accompanied by conditions as part of God's covenant with Israel. The Torah, as well as the prophets, frequently shows concern for treatment of the alien or foreigner within the territory of Israel, with the reminder that the Hebrews were themselves once foreigners in Egypt. Being the chosen people has responsibilities and risks, not just privileges. The Israelites are constantly threatened by God with punishment for not fulfilling their responsibilities as part of the covenant. And in Deuteronomy it says, "If you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all His commands and decrees, the Lord will send on you curses. The Lord will scatter you among all nations, from the one end of the earth to the other." And Jeremiah quotes God as saying, "If you will not heed these words, I swear by myself, says the Lord, that this house shall become a desolation." I taught a semester at Bethlehem University in 2007, as I said, and I returned to the West Bank for 5 weeks last fall to serve as a reservist with Christian Peacemaker Teams, or CPT. Ron Sider is a Mennonite who founded the organization Evangelicals for Social Action, and he gave the Mennonites a challenge. What would happen if Christians devoted the same discipline and self-sacrifice to nonviolent peacemaking that armies devote to war? And he said, unless we're ready to die developing new nonviolent attempts to reduce conflict, we should confess that we never really meant that the cross was an alternative to the sword. A few years after that challenge in 1984, some of the historic peace churches, the Mennonites, Brethren, and Quakers primarily, formed Christian Peacemaker Teams. And it today includes those people from those 3 historic peace churches, but it also includes members of the wider Christian church. And CPT places violence reduction teams in crisis situations and militarized areas around the world at the invitation of local peace and human rights workers. Current CPT teams are located in Palestine, Colombia, and Iraq, currently in Kurdistan in the northern part of Iraq. There are Aboriginal justice teams in Canada to deal with the conflict between the Aboriginal people and the primarily mining and fishing interests. There are some short-term representatives or short-term delegations have been sent to the African Great Lakes area in eastern Congo and Burundi. And they also have occasional teams located at the U.S. borderlands in Arizona, for example. The CPT presence in the West Bank has historically been in the city of Hebron. Hebron is the only West Bank city with Jewish settlements inside the urban area itself. There are 130,000 Palestinians in Hebron, and there are 400 Israeli settlers who have really been squatters in buildings inside the city itself. And Israel has provided over 1,500 soldiers to protect those settlers, roughly 4 soldiers to protect each settler. And in addition, there's the city of Kiryat Arba, or settlement of Kiryat Arba, which is on the outskirts of Hebron. Hebron has a great cultural and religious importance to all the children of Abraham, Jew, Muslim, and Christian. It's the location of the Il Ibrahimi Mosque, which is built over the cave of Machpelah, the tomb of Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Leah, and Rebekah. And it's a holy place for both Muslims and Jews. And it's now been partitioned into both mosque and synagogue. The Jewish settlers in the city of Hebron are extremely militant Zionists whose aim is to terrorize the Arabs and to drive them from the city. CPT stands with Palestinians and Israeli peace groups engaged in nonviolent opposition to the military occupation, to collective punishment, settler harassment, home demolitions, and land confiscation. One of the aspects of the project was accompanying students to school each day. Last year, CPT withdrew its team from Hebron for several reasons, including a lack of funds and personnel, but it still has a presence in the area known as the South Hebron Hills, south of Hebron. Up here you see Hebron, and this area is called the South Hebron Hills, and in particular, CPT is located at the village of At-Tawani. This is the area in which David, while he was leading an outlaw band of several hundred soldiers before he became king, hid from King Saul. And it's easy to understand how David could lose himself among the hills and caves in this area. The South Hebron Hills are rocky and barren, populated by few Arabs and formerly nomadic Bedouins in scattered villages. Here is a photo showing the village of At-Tawani. This is one of the Palestinian villages in these hills. I simply refer to it as Tawani often because At is an article of Arabic similar to the word the in English. Tawani is a village with 300 to 800 years of constant Palestinian Arab inhabitants. The caves there date from the time of Herod the Great. Population is about 150 people from 4 extended families. It's a farming and shepherding community. The farming is dry land farming, no irrigation. It's very reliant on weather. The Israeli settlement of Ma'on was established in 1982 on land confiscated from Palestinians without compensation. And like most Israeli settlements, it's atop a hill and overlooks the village of Tawani. This settlement is illegal by international law, but it is recognized as legal by the Israeli government. More recently, an outpost was established on a neighboring hilltop. This outpost is illegal even by Israeli law, and there are government threats to evict the settlers, but these seem to be empty threats because of the political power of the settlers. The original projected... this shows an aerial map of Tuwani and the Maon settlement, and then this wooded hilltop on which the outpost is located. The original proposed route of the separation wall would have cut off Tuwani and other Palestinian villages from the West Bank and annexed them to Israel. Here is Tuwani. Yatta is up here. That's the primary city in the area. And this was the proposed path of the separation barrier. It's believed that if the villagers were persuaded to abandon their homes, this path would surely have been accomplished. What you see here is a village near Tuwani, the Palestinian village of Karuba, which was abandoned in 1999 because of terrorism from the settlers as well as cave demolitions by the Israeli military. CPT was invited about 5 years ago to Tuwani by the village's mayor, and it's had a presence there ever since. The mayor states that the Palestinians were under pressure and feared that any reaction to Israeli violence would lead to being shot, that is, to Palestinians being shot. Defense by fighting back would make things worse, so in 2004 the village decided it was necessary to have a full-time international presence. And it contacted Christian peacemaker teams and another organization, Operation Dove. This was the first time people felt security. For the first time, people could somewhat relax. Operation Dove, by the way, is a Roman Catholic organization formed as an outcome of really Pope John the 23rd's actions. This shows CPT's home in Tuwani. Not much of a home. And since CPT arrived in Tuwani, the Tuwani mayor has also conducted workshops on nonviolent resistance for neighboring villages. Here you see the small village of Tuba consists of about half a dozen caves. And Tuwani has a school through grade 6 which serves children from smaller nearby villages like Tuba. This shows a cave home in Tuba. One of the children in Tuba. Okay, in this map, aerial photo, you see Tuba, and you see Tuwani, and you see the path children would be taking to go to school. It leads directly between the settlement and this illegal outpost. The path that's walked by the Tuba children takes them between Maon and the outpost and exposes them to attacks by settlers. CPT began accompanying the children on the path between the settlement and the outpost, but the Israeli courts responded to settler complaints and ruled that CPT was not allowed to continue this activity. Instead, the courts directed the army to provide an escort. Unfortunately, the army is sometimes late, sometimes fails to appear altogether, and the children are required to take a much longer route. And this has become much worse since the recent invasion of Gaza. And Pat Meyer was just telling me before earlier in the evening that I think yesterday 3 children were kidnapped and taken to the settlement and beaten. Shepherds from the villages graze their sheep on the hills, including the hills adjoining my own, and Christian Peacemaker teams provides accompaniment to these settlers. During the dry season, while I was there, the sheep and goats feed upon thorn bushes. There is not a blade of grass to be seen. The rains come in the winter months, and the grass appears again, so I'm told. When shepherds get within sight of the settlement, the settlers usually call the military, who come and order the shepherds to move away. And when CPT isn't with the shepherds, and sometimes even when they are, masked settlers have attacked the shepherds and their flocks, stealing and killing the animals. Here's an incident in which the military approached a shepherd and ordered him to move his sheep away from the settlement, even though it was on Palestinian land. Some of the Palestinian fields are in valleys very near to the settlement and the outpost. And here you see a valley of fields which lead up almost to the edge of the outpost in the trees here. Farmers have been attacked as they plant or harvest wheat and barley and lentils on these small plots of land, or even harvest their olives. While I was there, some of these fields were plowed for the first time in 8 years, which was a sign of great hope for the Palestinians. While some of the plowing is done by tractor and chisel plow, most is still done by a donkey pulling a single chisel. And because there are so many stones, the point of a plow is quickly worn away. You can see all the rocks in that field. Sometimes appear to be more rocks than soil. Here's a photo showing one of those plows. And one of the fields, which, as I said, you can't see the dirt for the rocks. The Israeli military and border police patrol the area and sometimes and often stop vehicles to check IDs and to harass the Palestinians. They detain the Palestinians, preventing them from getting to their jobs, from taking their produce to market, and from getting to hospitals for medical emergencies. CPT hopes to reduce this treatment by being present using video cameras to record the military's actions and discourage maltreatment. This particular soldier looked what I would consider mean. But for the first time in many years, perhaps because of CPT presence and training of the villagers in nonviolent resistance, there's begun to be a hope which has encouraged villagers to rebuild demolished homes and to build new homes for growing families. So the population in Tuwani is actually growing now. And there's a construction of a new cistern for water near Tuwani. The mosque, which has been demolished once and is still under demolishment orders, has been rebuilt. And life is going on somewhat normally, I guess. CPT is a small organization short on resources, a budget of about $1 million per year, which is the cost of only 2 minutes for the military occupation of Iraq. There are 42 full-time workers in the field, 169 reservists, of which I'm one. Reservists spend several weeks each year in the field, and they have 14 full-time staff. I also want to mention a couple of books this evening which have helped me to see more clearly the commonality of the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Art Gish, who is serving with Christian Peacemaker teams in Atawani during my time there, has a book in progress about the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Art considers himself to be both Jewish and Muslim as well as Christian, and he often worships with Jews and Muslims in the U.S., and he always worships in the mosque in Atawani. And I also found, after I returned, another book called A Deadly Misunderstanding, written, ironically enough, by a former right-wing Republican congressman. But as he learned about Islam and he read the Quran, he discovered the place of honor given to Jesus in the Quran. He points out the parallels between the Shema of Israel, that is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. And the greatest commandment cited by Jesus, which essentially is the Shema. And, of course, the second commandment stated by Jesus, which is like the first, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And then the Shahada of Islam, namely, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Now, it shouldn't need to be said, but nevertheless, I feel it does need to be said. I have relatives who have this confusion. Allah is not a different God. Allah is just the Arabic word for God. It's very similar to the word Allah, as I think it's pronounced, in the Aramaic language spoken by Jesus. Anyone who makes that profession of faith, the Shahada, in the presence of witnesses is considered a Muslim. And Muslims are expected to adhere to the 5 pillars of Islam. While living in Palestine, I was very impressed by the devotion of the typical Muslim. Their constant devotion to prayer, their charity to the poor and needy, fasting for the month of Ramadan, and of course their once-in-a-lifetime, usually, trip to the holy sites in Mecca. Anyone who adheres to these 5 pillars is a Muslim. And you notice there is no creed other than the Shahada, which Muslims are required to adhere to. According to the Quran, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus were all totally surrendered to God and therefore considered to be Muslims. If you've not read the Quran, you would be surprised at what it says about Judaism and Christianity. It's said that there's more written about Jesus in the Quran than there is about Muhammad. The Quran mentions Jesus more than 90 times. He's said to be of God's Spirit. He's described as pure, righteous, without sin. He's described as the Messiah. He's described as the gospel or good news, as the Word of God. In the Quran, it says, we believe in God and the revelation given to us and to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes, and that given to Moses and Jesus, and that given to all prophets from their Lord. We make no difference between one and another of them, and we bow to God in Islam, that is, in submission. The Quran says, "It is He who sent down to thee step by step in truth the book, confirming what went before it. And He sent down the law of Moses and the gospel of Jesus before this as a guide to mankind. And He sent down the criterion of judgment between right and wrong." The Quran actually says that Jews, Christians, and Muslims shall all be saved. All those who believe in the Quran and follow the Jewish scriptures, and the Christians, any who believe in God and the last day and work righteousness, shall have their reward with their Lord. On them shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve. Muslims are not, of course, Christian. There are some important theological differences, but it cannot be said that Muslims, quote, don't believe in Jesus. A major sticking point, of course, is theological, the phrase Son of God. Early Christians considered all believers to be sons and daughters of God. Sonship describes a personal relationship with God, not implying biological descent. Mary is highly revered in the Quran, which, like the New Testament, teaches the virgin birth of Jesus. But to say Jesus was Son of God is not to say that Mary was somehow impregnated by God. And the Christian doctrine of the Trinity is offensive to the monotheism of Islam. But in fact, the doctrine of the Trinity is not even found in the New Testament. It was developed in the 4th century at the Council of Nicaea, along with several other philosophical concepts about the divinity of Jesus and the Incarnation. Early Christianity was pacifist. There's nothing in the New Testament which supports the idea of violent self-defense or killing of one's enemies. Up until the time of Constantine in the 4th century, the Christian church was essentially pacifist. But then the church became officially recognized as the church of the empire, and it forsook the teachings of Jesus about nonviolence. And likewise, Islam in its beginnings was a nonviolent religion. The word peace, salam, is used constantly in Muslim conversations, greetings, and writings. And the transformation of Islam from its pacifist beginnings parallels that of Christianity, except that while Christianity took maybe 300 years to begin to serve the empire, Islam changed more rapidly into a religion of empire within 50 years of Muhammad's death. Within 50 years of Muhammad's death, the Muslim empire stretched from the Atlantic coast of North Africa to Central Asia. Some of the teachings of Muhammad sound very much like those of Jesus. Shall I inform you of the best morals of this world and the hereafter? To forgive him who oppresses you, to make a bond with him who severs from you, to be kind to him who insults you, and to give to him who deprives you. I've already stated that. While I was preparing this, it occurred to me that there's some parallels of sorts between Islam and Mormonism. Islam is really very much closer to Christianity than is Mormonism, which was also established by a new prophet, Joseph Smith, who also received a revelation of new scriptures from an angel, namely Moroni, just as the Quran is said to be a revelation received from the angel Gabriel. Strangely enough, while Mormonism has become tolerated, if not respected, to the point that we even had a presidential candidate, or a candidate for the nomination who was Mormon, Islam is still viewed with suspicion by Western Christians. Even though, as I said, the theology of Islam is much more compatible with Christianity than is Mormonism, in my opinion. In the second chapter of his letter to the Ephesians, Paul wrote, "Christ is our living peace. He has made a unity of the conflicting elements of Jew and Gentile by breaking down the barrier which lay between us. So you are no longer outsiders or aliens, but fellow citizens. You belong now to the household of God. You are all part of this building in which God Himself lives by His Spirit." These words of Paul are certainly relevant to today's conditions in the Holy Land. Jews, Christians, and Muslims are all children of Abraham, are all part of God's household. But of course, the tragedy is that so few recognize and accept this. And I would encourage anyone who, with interest in Christian Peacemaker teams, to check out their website. Also, I have a sheet over here that you can put your email address on if you'd like to have updates about the current happenings in the village of Otawani in the South Hebron Hills. And so concludes my presentation.
Thank you for a very inspirational presentation. And also, I would like to thank PJP and especially Julia for inviting me today to speak with you guys quickly. My name is Diana, and I'm here with the U.S. campaign to end the Israeli occupation. They have started a grassroots movement. It's a national thing where community organizers are collecting signatures to end U.S. military aid to Israel. So as a lot of you already know, during the 3-week period in December and January, there was about 1,300 people that were dead, 5,000 injured, and about $2 billion damage to civilian infrastructure, and not to mention the human rights abuses and also the breaking of international law, which is what's going to be my focus of today. One of the major human rights abuses that Israel committed was the restricted provisions of food, fuel, medicine, and electricity to 1.5 million Palestinians. There was a great report that Amnesty International came out with about last month. They also pointed out a couple of other laws that Israel broke during this period, and also during the 41-year-old siege, which included breaking of international humanitarian law, breaking of laws of war, and breaking of international human rights law. And even the director of the Middle East for Amnesty International publicly stated that to a large extent, Israel's military offensive in Gaza was carried out with weapons, munitions, and military equipment supplied by the USA and paid for with U.S. taxpayers' money. So that's why I am here today. The matter of fact is that the 41-year-old siege, as well as the 3-week war, is not possible without U.S. aid to Israel. And Israel is the largest recipient of U.S. military aid. The last Memorandum of Understanding, which is an agreement that both countries sign every 10 years, provided Israel with $2.38 billion in military aid. This is supposed to increase to $3.1 billion by fiscal year 2018. And Israel is also breaking domestic law. A couple of the major ones are the Arms Export Control Act, which state that countries purchasing or receiving U.S. weapons cannot use them against civilians and must restrict their usage to internal security and legitimate self-defense. Another law that Israel is breaking is the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, which states that no assistance may be provided under this part of the law to the government of any country which engages in consistent pattern of gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. So what we can do as U.S. taxpayers is we can sign the petition that Julia is going to pass out right now. You can, which pretty much is pressuring the Congress and as well as the Obama administration to cut military aid to Israel. You can send a postcard. The postcards are being passed out as well if you want to think about it, if you want to look into it some more. I understand people are sometimes hesitant without a lot of information. You can contact the White House, the State Department, and your representatives, which is very easy to do, especially if you sign up with endtheoccupation.org. They're a fantastic organization. You give them your email address. They pretty much provide you with talking points. They give you examples of letters to the editor. They give you, just letters whenever there's something big coming up, just letters to Obama, to Clinton, everybody that's important. And all you got to do is sign your name and send it. It's very, very easy and makes a lot of difference. They've been somewhat successful with their campaign. And yeah, that concludes my little sideshow. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, we'll ask some questions here. The first one, how would you define evangelism? Is it an obstacle to peace when people of various faiths all believe that they have the one true answer with regard to religion?
Well, I guess I would say yes, it is certainly an obstacle to peace. I think there should be, of course, a frank, open discussion of differences, but attempts to convert other people is certainly an obstacle to peace. And incidentally, Christian peacemaker teams does not evangelize in the usual sense of the word. There's no attempt made to convert Muslims to Christianity.
Next question. Please explain the mode of nonviolence resistance in Palestine and how it is effective.
Well, I'm not an expert on that. In Tawani, the nonviolent resistance is simply if the shepherds are ordered to move their flocks, they move them around the hill to the other side and then return very quickly to where they were. It's simply non-obedience to the authority. Includes things like removal of roadblocks that have been put in place by the military. And of course, marches and demonstrations.
In view of the new hardline administration in Israel, how do you feel CPT's ability and efforts in the Holy Land will be affected?
I'm hoping they won't be affected. There's always the threat of CPT personnel being denied visas as they try to enter the country, and that has happened occasionally. But I'm hoping that is not going to happen at this time.
Hoping against hope.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there are There have been some arrests of CPT personnel just in the last couple of months since the heightened tension because of the Gaza situation. But in each case, they've been released after a day or so.
Did you witness Israeli Jews who were working with Muslims and Christians to defend Palestinians?
Yes, definitely. There are, I should have mentioned, there are several Israeli peace groups that are active in the South Hebron Hills. Ta'ayush, I guess is the way it's pronounced, is one of the major ones. During the day of plowing that I mentioned, for example, they sent out a couple of dozen Israelis to monitor the plowing. And they often provide legal assistance if Palestinians have been arrested and are held. The Israeli peace groups are a very important element of the Palestinian resistance, I think.
Final question, from a perspective from the field, what is the most successful way for promoting justice in Israel-Palestine?
Well, I guess I'm of the opinion that if the U.S. population knew what was going on, they would rise up and put a stop to it. I feel that if the Israeli population were to be better informed about what's going on, and they are not because of media restrictions, I think that would go a long ways toward bringing an end to this situation.
I see another question that was hiding on the back side of a card here, so I'll ask that then. Does CPT or do you have an opinion about whether a two-state solution is still viable?
I don't think I would try to speak for CPT. Personally, I don't see much hope for it as being viable. I think there will be, just as in South Africa, there's going to eventually be a one-state solution, and the majority Arab population will prevail. But interestingly enough, I read very recently that there was a U.S. intelligence report which predicted that within 20 years the state of Israel would no longer be in existence as a Jewish state. There would be a one-state solution. Most of the Israelis would immigrate elsewhere. I don't
have another question. Is it an expectation of Christian peacemaker teams that their volunteers will be open to discuss their religious views with those people whom they are serving, if asked to by them? How often does this occur to your knowledge? How often does a Christian-Muslim religious dialogue occur in the work of CPT?
Yes, we're very, very open to dialogue between the Muslims in the village and the Christian peacemaker team members. And I can't say how deep the conversations go, but it's a frequent topic of conversation. There's certainly no one is afraid to speak of religion. Here in the U.S., sometimes it seems like religion is one of these taboo subjects. Polite people don't talk about religion and politics, but over there it's a very live issue, and must say I've never met anybody, any Muslim in Palestine myself, who has showed any antagonism towards Christianity. So,
do you have a question? Did you have any dealings with Hamas? If so, what is your perception of this group from your dealings?
I am not aware that I had any. I mean, you confront police in the street and so on, but for the most part, Hamas has been restricted to Gaza, and the Fatah is in charge of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. So if I did have contact with anybody in Hamas, I was not aware of it.
Okay. Do we have any more cards? Real quick. Okay, thank you very much for coming. We'll be milling around here if you want to talk to us, and please visit the literature table. We have a lot more information available there. Again, we're meeting tomorrow night, 6:30 or thereabouts at Alibaba Restaurant. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.